Welcome to your weekly evening weirding session. I'm your host, C. Savory, creator of Fractal Praxis. Today, it sure seems to me like chaos reigns, and that there is much to process, much less speak on. In crisis and overwhelm, it's easy to be swept up, depleted, even destroyed by reacting to a trillion little details. So in this talk, I'm going to model the power of orienting to the patterns, not the details, of what's happening. To see through to the patterns of things can really help us navigate in complex situations in general. So I'm going to speak very generally today, as generally as possible without losing meaning, naming patterns I see underpinning what are truly complex situations. However, I hope by the end of this recording you'll see why this approach is intentional and meaningful. As we touched on last week, we live in a time of apocalypses. It may seem like everything is going a mile a minute these days, and like things are truly getting worse. On the one hand, things are getting worse, much worse. On the other hand, things are getting revealed. The violence and oppression intrinsic to this society is just now becoming much more overt and out in the open. However, this feeds a positive, albeit unwanted, feedback loop in which the more overt the violence, the more socially sanctioned it becomes, and so the toxicity of it spreads around quickly, turning neighbor against neighbor. And we feel the cognitive dissonance caused by the taboos and myths that once supposedly kept us united and protected, shattering and snapping and breaking all over the place. Some taboos are indeed meant to keep us safe, like taboos against explicit violence, but all of that is going out the window now. Apocalypse, by definition, is a time of disorganization, where everything is subject to really extreme reorganization, not always for the better. Sometimes death is death, and it comes for us all. It cannot be thwarted. But as we discussed last week, anytime you evade death and you remain a living, breathing process, then you will have opportunities to learn from your experiences, and you'll be invited into this sacred process of meaning making common to all life. So let's make sure we do some meaning making today. Today I want to explore deep principles of existence and how I see them reflected in this moment of complexity and collapse. I want to talk about the countervailing universal forces of entropy and negentropy. And I'll share my method for what I do, how I make decisions, when I am completely suffocating with overwhelm and complexity and cannot see clearly what to do next. If things feel like they're breaking down now, losing complexity, getting stupider even, that's accurate. It's a sign, in general, of decay. A sign that a civilization is dying, or at least is very ill. But what even is ill, and what is dying? Well, these are terms of entropy. Entropy is also known as chaos. It is a disintegrating force. It means the loss of information in a system. When a person dies, effectively, it is because entropy has overtaken the body. Entropy is a law governing the whole universe, and since the Big Bang, it's hypothesized that everything in the universe is going to gradually, over time, submit toward total entropy. Planets and stars and galaxies, all relatively organized phenomenon, will become dispersed into floating, hazy, distributed material floating in space. Except for the presence of one other countervailing force shaping the universe, negentropy, or syntropy, the opposite of entropy. Self-organizing systems, best exemplified in the system of life, life as a whole, or life as a pattern. Life gets more complex over time. Life is able to accumulate and, in a way, metabolize information from its environment into more elegant, more diversified structures, like complex ecosystems or elaborate philosophical systems. Negentropy is life, the organization of the available information into higher order structures, like the movement of disparate individual musicians into the form of a symphony orchestra, or the organizing of millions of individual households into a city. Life feeds on information in order to mount more adaptive responses. Life converts information into new and more effective forms. In terms of the Santiago School theory, this is also called cognition, and it encompasses both species evolution, the form our bodies take in response to information in the environment, and the domain of minds and the meanings that we make with our minds, which is what we typically think of when we say the word cognitive. The way arts and artists shape a society, the way science and technology grows upon itself. These are all evidence of life's negentropic behavior. Definitively, life is anti-entropy. Life is subject to entropy, which is why all creatures die. But life's perpetual struggle in the universe is to overcome entropy when and where possible. This brings about a life-death-life cycle in which death is always followed by some new form, some new type of rebirth. These understandings are important for helping us interpret the patterning of this moment. Entropy is not neutral. So we are locating ourselves in a time of great compounding losses. The loss of complexity is not neutral. In fact, it is furthering entropy and undermining life in general. Take, for example, the asteroid hitting Earth 65 million years ago that killed the dinosaurs and in fact annihilated 90% of all species on the planet. This was an entropic penetration into all of Earth's ecosystems. No one was unaffected, a true apocalyptic disaster. That's not to say that the space created by such a killing off did not also give way over a long period of time to the kind of complex ecosystems and flourishing that we previously experienced and that led to the emergence of humans. So, who is to say that the collapse of complex ecosystems that is underway across the planet today, or the US national government collapse that appears to be underway today, or the toxic collapse of information and truth in a system fully polluted and colonized by tech-assisted disinformation and bias-assisted misinformation today? Who is to say that any one of these collapses is not just the next massive death that will radically reshape the landscape in which the rest of us survive? Maybe the death could give way to a much more intelligent and beautiful society later on. But in the immediate term, there is widespread death, destruction, loss, damage, harm. We are likely to be damaged, to have our ordinary lives upended, at least. And the modern capitalist, anti-market capitalist, lifestyle is extremely consumptive of energy. This system seeks to convert all available life force and information into a monoculture in which all available resources can be sucked into its extractive, power consolidating system that leaves wastelands, destroyed lives, and seriously damaged natural systems in its wake. By forcing all of us to participate in capitalism's games, even to our own detriment, our life energy is effectively subverted and sucked into a system that's killing us. Seeking to repress life's natural diversity and coercively conform all human life into a narrow formula along the lines of be more like or be more subservient to rich and or Christian white men, we are actually engaging in a fundamentally anti-life system. And with the latest political movements to return us to rule by oligarchy, by monarchy even, compared to democracy, this represents a functional loss of complexity. And we're starting to see a pattern here. This system is bound by its nature to accelerate the death of all of us. This system flees from true freedom. It resents complexity. It rejects diversity because it is a culture of people who have not developed themselves for genuine, equitable collaboration, for discourse, for listening, for cooperation, for sense-making. Instead, the vocal, anti-democracy, anti-diversity, wealth-consolidating, dehumanizing agenda of the day is an anti-life framework. It is a path to material death, cultural death, intellectual death, and spiritual death for all of us. Today we're witnessing the apparent rise of a cynical, dissociated, death-embracing culture, an entropy-advancing culture. This culture acts as an arm of entropy. It does entropy's work for it, shaving off any difference through violent repressive means, killing, shaming, or exiling or erasing all those that do not comply, and assimilating into an ever more narrow culture all those who remain. These are the characteristics of an entropy-glorifying culture. The system that, by its own logic, would rather kill all of us off than evolve, than reflect and transform into something new. This is a culture that would be happy to die and kill to maintain itself. Much like a cancer or a parasite that must ultimately kill its host and therefore itself too. The system of globalized anti-market capitalism and colonizer, worldview is dying, but it still has its grips on our own lives and livelihoods. The system ain't dead yet, and those who have been made effectively kings by their manipulation of this system can more than figuratively lord it over us. At least for one last triumphant gasp, some flashbang at the very end of life. But it cannot sustain. So how will it go down? And will we be compelled to go down right along with it? Or is there a means by which we could rise above? Reducing complexity is not neutral. It never is. Life is designed to move against the tides of death and destruction. Life moved towards more wholeness, more love, more complexity. It is in the nature of life to reach for more complexity, to seek more space for each of us to live full and free lives more art, more ideas, more knowledge, more vibrancy, and more challenging situations to overcome. If we identify as life, as extensions of life, as agents of life, or as fractals of life, we must take up this sacred fight against entropy as our own, discerning when, where, how, and how much to thwart entropy's agenda. We must understand it's actually our job as living beings to manage the discomfort involved in processing diversity, in processing complexity, to not reduce the irreducible, but through our thinking and our creating efforts, cause more higher order structures to come forth that can effectively contain all of us in the richness and harmony of our authentic existence. Those who cling desperately to an entropic culture, perceiving it as strong and capable of protecting them, are bound to go down with the ship. Whereas those who stay close to the earth, who don't mind diversity or changing their minds, who acknowledge changing environments and the need to adapt, who remember and practice the ancient wisdom of simply organizing into loving kinship networks of mutual aid and meaning making. Those who are minimally invested in and or utterly resistant to the entropic system of anti-market capitalism, such as indigenous communities and those who are engaged in radical and decolonizing work. These folks may hold the seeds to be germinated in a new world. And they might even experience this system's death as a welcome reprieve from onslaught, as a window of grace in which to finally do the work to repair, heal, recover, and reclaim appropriate adaptive ways of being here, ways of living here on Earth that are more life-enhancing and urgently need to spread to more people. Humankind must awaken to the truth that as life, we need to make more space for each other, not less. We need to practice listening and embracing diversity. Our lives are materially, tangibly threatened by the loss of species diversity proliferating today, and by the squandering of human potential and the endangering of diverse human cultures too. We must recognize that this society, which perhaps structurally and functionally protects our lives, is destroying life in every direction like a spinning top, and we will eventually go down with it. Now is the time for deciding where our allegiances lie in a war, perhaps a war between entropy and negentropy, that is meeting us at our doorsteps. Revolutionary action, revolutionary understanding and awakening and remembering is called for. But what can be done? What to do? One of the challenges of complex systems is they are, by nature and by definition, not predictable. It is often more than hard, it's actually impossible to discern what needs to be done, to make the meaning of figuring out, what is my place and position in this system? What are my points of leverage? What is my role to play? Who am I? And what must I do in this situation? As an individual, but also collectively. This predicament is universal, indeed. The worldviews that we form to help us understand and navigate the world are never perfectly accurate. They always have some kind of gap. We can only ever strive to bring our worldviews into closer fidelity to the truth of the world, which brings us into more harmony and more mutually beneficial relationships than ever before. So, in essence, even if you're just trying to make meaning right now, you have an advantage. Fractal praxis advances this idea: when in doubt, act more like life. What does that mean, act more like life in general? What does life do in general? What behavior is definitive of life in general? Learning, making more meaning, fostering conditions for more diverse life to flourish through our interactions. Discern good quality information, that is truth, from poor quality or toxic misinformation and disinformation. Formulate what can be known of the truth into more elegant frameworks for existing, which brings us all the way back to learning and making more meaning. We, as fractals of life, adopt the work and the effort of making life more meaningful now and forever. We could have ourselves a beautiful society founded on mutual flourishing and mutual seeing and understanding one another. We could apply our wisdom and technology in ways that enrich life for every participant in the living systems. We could do all of this. Such a world is not even that far off. If only we can slough off this heavy, suffocating cloak of ignorance and fear-based operating, of authoritarian regimes and othering, of the need to control one another at all, of the absurd mythos that money is meaning, that aggression is strength, that oppression is achievement. We, as fractals of life, commit ourselves to collaboration, claiming we can surely craft better myths than these. The death-seeking culture will succeed if it can kill off our imaginations and aspirations from even pursuing these routes. That is, from subscribing us into their cynical worldview. They want us to think that there's no other choice but to die along with them, to submit to their terrible logic and their awful game. But like an illusion, under the right circumstances, this whole veil can be lifted, perhaps easily. So let's throw ourselves into the work now of aligning ourselves with a living, creating, caring, regenerative culture. A great place to start is by reclaiming your attention and the sense you are making from things rather than just adopting other people's beliefs about things. Steal your attention back radically from the corporate platforms engineered to addict you and surveil you. Attend to your own lived experience. Attend to the intelligence in the networks you're a part of. Where do you feel aliveness in this system? Move toward it forever. There is an endless amount to learn, but not endless time. We can effectively cut through the noise and chaos of this moment by anchoring in an identity that transcends the worship of flailing, outdated gods. We can claim authentic identification with life and look for the ways to be more like life, every way, in every day. A fractal expression of what makes our lives beautiful and livable. A fractal expression of our intelligence. Thank you for witnessing and sense-making with me. Now is the time in the weekly ritual when we pass the proverbial basket. If you'd like to support these sessions and fractal praxis, please make a donation using the link in the description below, or consider becoming a Fractal Praxis member. Finally, and with much gratitude, I wish you farewell, merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again.